what I feel is that after you learn how you learn best by yourself, you can literally learn anything. So that's why I think this program is very important.
Welcome to the Reinventing Education podcast. I'm Rob McLeod. This is a podcast for teachers, parents, and students who wish to create a more compelling vision for education. On this episode, we speak with Traian, Ana, and Karina of the Alternative University in Bucharest, Romania, an institution that is updating what a university can be. We discuss how a school can serve the role of a coach as well as an educator, how an institution like a university can be flexible with its systems, structures, and communities to meet an individual student's learning needs. We discuss a student's relationship with learning, how to foster self-directed learning and then self-directed living, how developing a portfolio of real-life projects serves a person entering the workforce more than grades or a diploma, and how learning must be connected to real-life projects. Traian, Ana, and Karina, thank you very much for taking the time to join Brendan and I. I'm very excited to talk about the Alternative University with the three of you today. The way that we've connected was I had put a call out through a Reinventing Organization Facebook group and just asking if people knew of, interesting educators, people doing really cutting edge things. I was completely blown away by the fact that I had not yet come across your school. And I really appreciate that you had responded to the message. The scale and the scope of what you're doing in Romania is incredible. Just looking through some of the information you sent me, like 1,500 students you've been in contact with, several startups, 23 different startups launching out of work the school has done, 6 TEDx speakers, and a whole bunch of other things. I guess I'm most curious, maybe the three of you, to hear some of your own stories, how you got involved with the school, and perhaps maybe comparing it to some of your previous experience within education and what it was about the Alternative University that spoke to you.
I'm like the most recent follower of the Alternative University. I've become a part of the Alternative University firstly as a student in 2013 or something, as far as I remember. And back then I was part of this student NGO in Bucharest. I was already interested in how education should be done and how we can improve the quality of education for students, because the university I was part of did not necessarily take into account these things, even though it was one of the biggest ones in Romania. And I discovered the Alternative University in a moment when it was actually changing from CROSS, which was this resource center for student organizations, and it became back then the Alternative University, and I was like the first alternative student, the first generation. We were the change makers generation. And what got me is that it was more about values than anything else. Like I haven't seen another learning environment that would focus on values that much. And it got me at learning. It's one of the values that was mine as well. And I wanted to live it as much as possible, like a combination of learning and daring. And I was like, okay, I have to be there. I have to be with these people. And now I'm actually, I was part of the core team of the Alternative University for the past 3 years in different roles. And now I'm also in charge of the community. I'm a community manager, let's just say. Manager, not manager. Community firekeeper. I don't know. Yeah, so I'm doing things together with Traian, Ana, and so many other co-creators that we have today in the community, and we want to basically rebuild the way we are organizing the university. But it's a really interesting process, and it still got me at learning and daring.
It sounds like as though you, as what I'm going to call staff or firekeepers in your case, it sounds like you're embodying those same values that are being spoken of for students. So there's not a divorce between staff expectations and student expectations. in that line. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it's totally correct. And I would say that on the contrary, we are challenging the staff to live the values. And whenever we feel like we we are not living in them anymore, we basically challenge the way we are working together. And that's something that's currently happening in the team. We basically decided that we don't want to have a core team anymore, because the people who were part of this core team were like really stressed out trying to make it work. They were all hard workers there, but when we zoomed out, we realized that nobody was living in freedom anymore. And I'm like, whoa, we need to be the first one who are doing that. So that's why we started challenging the way we are organizing the community, and now we are inviting everybody to co-organize with us the experiences, and not only the learning experiences, but also the more, I don't know, the things that have to do with the organizational level per se. So that's something, as an example, that proves that we are the first ones who need and who should live the values.
I see the word student-led behind what the university is all about. And to me, student-led, there's like a spectrum of it. There's like artificially student-led when you're kind of paying lip service to like, well, we asked the kids what they thought, and then we still did whatever we wanted anyways, to complete freedom, the daring, collaborating, this side of things. Can you give us a sense of what student-led means at the alternative university?
I was trying to to think about what would Tran say, because I somehow know the direction of his speech on this one. Basically, Tran left the team somewhere in 2015 because he wanted to travel around the world and discovered schools and educational projects. And now he's back, and maybe we can hear him. Okay. And after Tran left the team, we basically started putting more structure to our educational model. And that happened because we were looking at our students' needs. And that was a time when we decided that we want to reach out to more students, to go beyond the students who were part of student organizations. And what happened is that the profile of the student changed. We discovered that students had different needs. They were in need of structure more than we thought they would be when we started reaching out to students who were only part of the university, not necessarily involved in other projects, or they were not part of programs that would have allowed them to discover themselves better before becoming a part of our programs. So that was something that we need to take into consideration when we started putting more workshops, experiences. We basically put them forward, and students were deciding between which one they had to choose in one day or 1 week. And what happened is that we also raised the fee, and that basically impacted in a negative way the experience, because students started having this transactional mindset. They were paying a fee in order to receive something from us, and we felt the pressure of delivering a service, a product, something that we didn't have in the beginning in our minds. We didn't want that. So these were two things that we saw as effects, were that they were more transactional and they were expecting us to deliver. And that was something really similar to what happened inside the traditional system, where teachers provided information and content. And the second effect was that they were not necessarily self-directed, like they were in theory self-directed or going through self-directed programs. But in practice, this skill was not necessarily developing in the way we would have liked that to happen. So it wasn't about freedom and learning like crazy anymore. It was about attending some programs, and we did that for 2 years in a row. And that's when we wanted to stop and to get back to the self-organized environment that we had before.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's been a real evolution to the school itself, having started out with intentions and the inquiry into how you make those things happen. And it sounds like it kind of started to revert back to a more conventional school setting, but then it reinvented itself into what it is now. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it all had to do with our way of responding to their needs, and our maturity in responding to those needs, because we were like, okay, maybe at some point we had some pleasers patterns, like we have to do the things that they want us to do so that they're happy and they're going through the programs and they're fulfilled and so on, but it was not necessarily what we wanted.
And Traian, I'd be curious, you had started to begin to explain the origins of the school from the student activism onwards.
For example, for me, I was a student activist for 5 years. So all the time that I spent in the university, I was a part of student organizations, and we were trying to make universities more student-centered, and that we, the students, have a bigger say in how the universities are run. So after these years of activism, when we said we're going to make our own university, we wanted two things. One, to be student-centered, so completely student-centered. That means each student would self-design his own learning. And the second one, that the overall space of the university, the collective space, would be governed collectively by students. So each student would have equal say in what's going on. What happened in the beginning, we focused on creating this self-design model. So we asked ourselves, how do you make an environment where you have 100 students and 100 learning paths? So we focused on that for a while, and there was this core team that was organizing everything. So you had a complete individual freedom to choose your own path and to design your own path. But there was a core team organizing the menu, let's say. And at one point, the need pushed us towards something else, because we couldn't, we had financial difficulties. And when the first person got out of the team for this reason, saying that it's very difficult for me from a financial point of view, so I'm leaving the team. This was a sort of wake-up call for us that we need to make this model financially sustainable, and we re-evaluated everything. So we ended up proposing to the students that some of them would join the core team. So that was our first step towards this direction of being co-designed and co-led with the students. And when the students joined the team, we were perfectly equal in that team. So there were some staff members that that they were full-time employed, and some volunteering students. But when we were discussing and taking decisions and all that, we were perfectly equal. So from that moment on, it was in a way co-designed and co-governed with the students. But there were only the students that decided to join the team. So in fact, this role of the core team remained pretty much the same. Only it was open for everybody to join. And now I think we're making the final step towards having a university that is truly self-organized. We actually were dismantling the core team, and we're inviting everyone to participate in a very open process of self-organization. We were not sure how we're gonna make it in every detail, but I think this is the natural step for us in this direction of having a university that is being governed by its own students.
Can you walk me through the perspective of a student who's entering the alternative university? I know from what I've read about you, it seems kind of three core elements of a personalized journey, an educational platform, and a learning tribe. And I'm already well aware, hearing what you're saying, that each student sounds like they would have a differentiated, unique path, 100 different learners with 100 different types of learning. But what's a common journey for a student into the school? How does their program come together?
I think I can give a little bit of perspective in this one. So hi, I'm Anna, and out of the three of us here, I think I'm the only one who wasn't part of the core team per se. I'm a former student, and then I kept really close with the university throughout the years. So I joined the university in 2008, and me and the other guys who joined the university back then, we like to call ourselves the guinea pigs of the model, because we were the first generation of students who would go through this. The very interesting fact that I think it's important to mention here is the fact that most students who come and join the alternative university in parallel are also part of a traditional bachelor program in Bucharest, or at least they were back then in 2010. I think right now things change a little bit, but back then there was no option to just like drop formal school and join something such as the alternative university. So for us, the process was extremely powerful, because you would go through these two very different learning models. One of them would be very traditional. You would go and sit in a room for a couple of hours, and you would have the teacher feed you information that you would have to memorize over and over again. And the other one, at the very complete opposite, where you would go there and everybody around you would say, like, this is it. Like, you would ask, so what do we learn here? And everybody would be like, well, what do you want to learn? So that was the very, very tough, like very important shift. In my case, I ended up investing all my time in the alternative university and almost not going at all in my bachelor, as in just going to the bare minimum in order to be able to get my diploma. But what I feel and what I've seen throughout the years, that's a very, very important thread in the learning model and in the design of the alternative university, is a program that each student goes when they join the alternative university. It's called Autonomy in Learning, and it's a one-on-one program where you have a student and then you have a facilitator. And the facilitator is somehow like a coach, but is not a properly trained coach. But let's just call it like this for the sake of the conversation. So he's a coach slash facilitator who helps the student understand how he learns best by himself. And I think that is the most essential program that the university has designed until now. From what I've seen and what I've known, there is no other similar program in any of the other learning environments or universities around the world. And this is something that the Alternative University team has been perfecting since 2009 onwards.
Yeah, can you give us a very small glimpse into what those one-on-one sessions would look like, or what the coach is providing to help someone uncover their best way of learning on their own?
Yeah, so it's a quite thorough process from the facilitator side of things, because there's a lot of emphasis put in making sure that the facilitators know how to deal with the conversations. But basically, in the very beginning, there's a discovery stage in which the student, first of all, figures out a little bit of who he is and what is actually relevant for him or her to learn. That is the very important thing. And throughout the process, what me as a student, for example, what I've learned was how, after discovering what I want to learn and what's relevant for me at any point, like throughout the year or in my career, for example, when I want to develop new skills, after I have understood what I want to learn, there's the how part. How do I do that? And one thing that the autonomy learning program does very well is that it makes students aware of all the learning resources around them. So there's not only the option of reading a book, of going to a class. It's the option of getting a mentor. It's the option of going on a learning journey. It's the option of, I don't know, learning by yourself, testing things. It's the option of, you know what, like you want to learn this, just go ahead and do it and figure out, draw people around you. So there's many options that the program makes you aware of, so that you can start and build your own learning program. So for example, when I started, one of my learning objectives was to learn German. And what we did was we were working for 3 months. We had a call once per week, or a meeting with my facilitator once per week. And we set up this learning objective, like learn German. And of course, the objective wasn't to learn German in 3 months, but the objective was to figure out the process that would help me kickstart my learning journey. And one of the very first things that I actually realized was that I wanted to learn German because it sounded cool and because I wanted an alternative to English, but there was no other real interest or relevance for me to do that. So then we had a conversation and we were like, okay, so now let's look at actually what really matters. So back then I was part of a student NGO as well. I was in charge of developing the learning programs for the rest of the students. So what I realized is that what's important for me to learn is how to become a learning designer and what are the things that I should look at. So basically for the next 3 months in the process, I experimented with tools, I experimented with meeting people and with getting the resources I need that would help me become a learning designer. That was, for me as a student in the process, that was a very up and down process, because it comes with frustrations. How do you organize your time? How do you make sure things happen? I would have weeks in which we draw the line of what did I actually learn, and there would be nothing there because I didn't have time. I didn't know how to organize my time. So all the challenges that you go through in day-to-day life, but this program helps you become aware of it and understand how you organize your learning so that you actually make learning happen in the way that works for you. And for me, that was the key of the way to unlock like all the possibilities that like what I feel is that after you learn how you learn best by yourself, you can literally learn anything. So that's why I think this program is very important. And maybe Tran and Corina have some more like newer perspectives on the program and why it's so important.
I would like to add only one thing, and it's related to how this autonomy learning actually helps you become a more self-organized community because it's the key element, the key thing that we need from everybody in the community so that we can actually be student-run or entirely student-run, right? And basically what happens is that we invite students to go firstly through this program so that they learn how to access resources more easily, maybe connect with people, discover what really works for them, reconsider their relationship with learning, and stop seeing it only as happening in a classroom. So there are many things that you discover and that afterwards help you in working better together with others. Like you can be a better collaborator, you can contribute to decision making, and so on and so forth. And these things are important for the other two elements that we have in our educational model, because we want to make the learning in circles. when you're learning with others, let's make this self-directed as well. Don't expect for somebody to come up with a plan. Let's make it together and decide together as a group what we want to learn. And the third level is about the community building. Whether we talk about learning in a specific circle together with other people who are interested in the same subject as you are, or we talk about the entire community with all the students, the alumni, the alternative teachers, and so on, you learn how to work with them and to contribute to the decisions, to put your contribution, and to learn how to consciously build a relationship by knowing yourself and learning how to better interact with the others. And these things are as relevant for us now as they were 10 years ago. And I think they are important because that's something that we acknowledged in this process of transitioning to a new way of organizing our community. We established that these three things that are part of our educational model are still core to what we do, and we don't want to lose them in this process, because they are really important and they make a lot of sense in terms of how we want to learn together. And our learning, we are aware of the fact that this actually creates a new world, a new way of living together. So yeah, that was my add-on to what Anna mentioned.
In hearing the three of you discuss the alternative universities, it sounds like the university itself is sort of a set of structures, a set of systems, a set of offerings that are flexible to what a student needs in their own personal journey within the group, and from what you're offering as well as an institution. And there's just something when you're speaking on it there, I just thought what you're describing, it just sounds mind-blowing that you would have to get to near the end of your educational experience to actually be in university before you're taught how you best learn, because that seems like a pretty critical skill for when you transition out of school into the rest of your life and into the workforce and into your own world, to have that strong sense of self about how you best learn. I'm just curious if there's any sort of anecdotes you have from students or others who've shared or expressed to you the profound change that the school has made for them.
I can answer this one. One of the things that we usually tell our students when they start applying this self-directed learning process is that the purpose of the program is to help you reconnect with your natural way of learning. And the best way to put that, or to express it more metaphorically, is like, remember how you were used to learning when you were a child, and they are all starting playing and integrating playing more with their learning process, because that's something that's actually missing a lot in the traditional approach. And they rediscover some of the things that they used to like. And one of the key metaphors that has worked pretty well in the past years is this of a sculpture. Do you want to be the sculptor or the wax? And they start thinking about what are the learning contexts that they feel more, they feel better like being the wax, accepting that somebody else will tell them what to do and how to do it and when to do it and so on. And what are the other contexts where they feel like they want to be the sculptors, they want to be the ones who are creating things and giving direction. And usually it's a mix of them. I haven't seen a student that would say, I want to be one or the other. They usually combine them depending on their learning contexts, roles, and so on. So this is something that I've seen happening, students becoming excited about being sculptors themselves. Or those who are more in the process of, okay, I still need to be wax a bit to let others give me things to learn or help me discover this new world. Because by the end of the day, we are aware of the fact that we're going through a transition. Whenever a student gets into our community, they are usually transitioning from this old patterns of thinking that they need to unlearn more to this new way of looking at your learning and how it works. And it's a matter of redesigning your relationship with your learning. It's not only that learning is a tool, it's a relationship with yourself by the end of the day, because you have your potential, your resources, the things that you want to do with your life. And if you decide that somebody else will make them happen, then you're not necessarily taking responsibility of this relationship. So I guess this is the hardest part of the process, to reconsider your relationship with learning and to make it yours. Stop putting it outside of yourself.
Well, I think the values of the school really align with that idea of helping someone create a new kind of relationship with their learning. Just because we haven't explicitly stated them, the ideas of playing, freedom, learning, collaborating, daring, and kindness. I'm sure if you look across most schools would say something similar, but it seems the way that you as an organization approach these with the students who are there just seems far more authentic than perhaps how more conventional schools would do. I think a lot of conventional schools would sort of be like, well, we already have the way we do things, and we do that in kind of a kind way. And you know, we have space for collaborating and some play in there. But it really sounds as though like these are the actual 6 ingredients that then inform how you organize as a structure, how you organize as a culture between students and the core team, and putting these 6 things front and center of an individual's learning. Just before we bring kind of Brendan in here to follow up on a few things, are there any other things you'd like to say about the university, maybe the values or other things we haven't addressed yet?
Yeah, I was thinking in answering your question about an anecdote. So I had this role of counselor for self-directed learning for quite some time. I think I worked with 12 people in all, and accompanying them for a year in their learning. This was fascinating for me. I think I really got how people actually learn only by accompanying so intimately these people. And I can give some examples of, so this process, in a way, you start being self-directed in your own learning, but actually what happens is you start to self-direct your life more, and you get off the autopilot. So for example, what I'm super happy that happened in the alternative university is that some people had the courage to design some paths in life that are unconventional and that are really aligned with who they are, but they weren't on their radar before. So for example, I was working with this girl, Sylvia, and her plan was to become a psychotherapist. And she comes from a family where both her parents are teachers, and she said she's never going to be an educator or in education. She will stay away from that. And in the process of becoming self-directed in her learning and asking herself questions and all that, at one point she was part of this event where we invited one of the staff in Summerhill School. It's one of the first democratic schools in the world. So this guy came and he gave a presentation about democratic education, and there was a movie screening afterwards about the school. It's a very, very touching movie about how children have freedom in their own education in that school. And then Sylvia got into this work group, that would try to create a first democratic school in Romania. There were 12 people, and they were all ages, and they started working on this school, and they worked for a year. And at some point, they invited Sylvia to be their sort of a project manager or something, and she accepted, although she was among the youngest in the group. And eventually, after a year, they realized that they cannot build the same school because they have different visions. So there were just a couple, like 12 people gathered at the conference. And after that experience, Sylvia said, you know what? This idea about a democratic school in Romania, it still makes sense for me. I want to do it. And she was alone. And she had this conversation with herself. How can I start a democratic school? I'm just a 22-year-old girl. And somehow she found a way. She decided that she's going to work with teenagers. And she said, I'm going to start with an urban adventure. So she started with the urban adventure. She got some teenagers involved. And then she said, together with the teenagers involved, let's make a camp. And they made a camp. And at that camp, they said, how about doing a learning community that would eventually transform into a democratic high school? So she's been on this path for quite some time. The community she runs now is called Learnity. And it's not yet a democratic high school, but it's on the way. And this is very unconventional path and a hard path to walk. And I think this is the kind of result that I cherish the most. When I see somebody walking a difficult path that is their own.
That to me is what's really coming across in the work that your school is doing, is it's preparing people for the world beyond the school, but it's preparing, I won't say a new kind of person, but it's kind of preparing the sort of person that's needed to adapt in this very volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world of someone who can find their own path, can unlearn the unhelpful aspects of the culture around them, and bring new, interesting things into the world around them. There's a lot more I think we could say on that, but Brendan, maybe you want to hop in here with some of your thoughts and join the conversation.
Thanks for that. It's really inspiring just to sit back and listen to that conversation happen, because many of the conversations myself and Rob have are centered entirely on that question of how we move towards getting some kind of autonomy in learning. We're both, I guess, primary educators. So a few of my questions that I have, and I don't have too many because I think you really set out the agenda of your school there really well, but one of the questions I had is, how do you learn to coach? So your teachers, as you bring them in, what's the kind of preparation or the support that they have to be able to facilitate this autonomy in student learning? And I'm just going to throw that out because I think all three of you have clearly got really strong and really valid opinions on these things. So I'm happy to hear from all or some of you.
Okay, so the first thing that we're doing each year is that we select a team of maybe 4 to 6 learners from the community. They are students in their second year or alumni with more experience. And what we're doing is that we create together with them the program for that year. And okay, the most important thing here is that we select the ones who are already having a higher level of self-directedness in their learning. Like, we want to have in that team the people who are practicing what they're preaching, so that we make sure we have a high quality in terms of how we pass this knowledge on, right? So they are the one together with whom we are designing the process. And then for the students who are becoming facilitators, we basically invite them to a series of maybe 5 to 7 trainings in which we basically take every part of the process that we're having here, and we go in depth in analyzing how it works, why it's important, what are some tools and resources that they can use in their facilitation sessions, how they can apply themselves those tools so that they see how it works, and so on. So it's basically a mix of practice, training, and understanding the model in its deepness, because it has some really important elements. For instance, if we only stop at habits and how they work and how they impact our learning processes, you can discover only in this spectrum many understandings. So this is what we do with the autonomy in learning program.
Cool. And I guess you're looking to have that holistic kind of approach, so that we're not just looking at one aspect of the students' learning, such as their academic needs, but also their underlying values and how they approach learning.
Yeah, and that's happening, and it's encouraged by design, by the way the program is designed, this way of looking at your learning, because you start from analyzing your values, your motivator factors, maybe some roles that you have currently in your life, and the learning environments that you're in, maybe social, virtual, physical learning environments, and how they affect your learning. So we try to give them as much perspectives as possible in terms of what are the elements relevant to your learning process.
Traian here. So I think the program, I think it's, I'm not sure it's clear from what Corina said, that this is a peer-to-peer program. So the students that are in their second year, they coach the students that are in the first year. And it's specifically designed like this because it works on both ends. So you have the student that is coaching, he's learning a lot about the learning process also. And when you have this role and you perceive it as being important, then you pay a lot of attention to this, to learning processes and how do you coach. And we always say, like, you are learning together and you are an example maybe for the new student. So you have this responsibility of taking your learning to the next level. And I think this is an important element of design, this peer-to-peer thing. And in a way, somehow, like, I think the best training that they actually have is their own experience as being coached. So you're being coached the first year, and the second year you're going to coach. And of course, we're adding these trainings and these refreshers. But I think I was at one point coordinating this program, and when I was looking at what happened in these relationships, I think people are using more of the things that happened to them, passing them on, than the things that we were trying to train in those trainings. So in a way, it's a very organic process of this community passing on knowledge and wisdom about how do you facilitate self-directed learning.
Yeah, I think that's a really important integral element, because I guess you've got, in essence, a rolling program where you're always training your new staff or teachers and coaches. And I guess that, as you say, it's going to organically help the organization to grow. And I guess my question is somewhat related to, I guess, the notion of assessment and success criteria, and how you're measuring or deciding on if the path is successful while it's taking place, and also if there's success at the end. Because of course, if the students are also in a bachelor's program, that has a very clear set of success criteria and an obvious endpoint. Is there an element of this within your program?
Yeah, what we did is that we tried to find something that allows personalized assessment, so that we don't, I don't know, we let them until the end to have these personalized tracks rather than us trying to standardize them. So this was something that we started looking at like 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and we discovered badges, like Mozilla Foundation started developing them as learning tools, and we basically use badges as ways of doing personalized assessment, because every student, whenever they are choosing a learning objective, they can use the badge to define it better. And basically you have this framework in which you define what do you want to achieve, what's the timeline, what are some criteria in place that you need in order to achieve a specific level, depending on where you are and what you want to achieve and so on. So we have this framework in place, and we also have some badges that we have developed ourselves in the university. So every student can actually access those badges or create their own depending on the learning objectives that they have. And this is something that we are still developing. It's not working that well for the entire community. There are the early adopter students and those who still need some convincing in using them. Yeah. But the whole idea is that by using the badge, you're basically gonna finish your program by having a portfolio rather than having a diploma. So whenever you're interacting with, I don't know, maybe people from the business sector, from when you want to apply to a specific job or something like that, you can actually send them your portfolio, which shows what's your practical experience, what are the skills that you have developed and how, and so on. So it's a more personalized approach. And from my point of view, it actually takes this hat from our heads, like we should be the ones who decide if your learning journey is successful or not. You're going to be able to evaluate that together with some experts and peers, depending on the feedback that you get from your own practical experience. So it's not up to us to decide if you're good or bad or whatever. We can offer you feedback and you decide if you want to integrate it or not in your portfolio.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. The badges idea, I checked out myself 5 or 6 years ago, and I loved the idea. And one of the struggles that I had of trying to begin to get it accepted within, say, a primary school system was that outside of, say, the system of badges, it was a little difficult to persuade people that it had quite as much, that they should give it quite as much credit as, say, a certificate, like a bachelor's, for example. But I do see that this kind of badge, or these kind of set of systems where you can take smaller credits and you can build them together to build your own path towards learning, it seems a really healthy one. I just want to briefly follow up. Do you see that that this kind of system will allow your students to kind of make further inroads into the businesses and areas they intend to go into next?
I think it's important to work at both ends, to work with the student and help him or her understand why it's a new, interesting way of evaluating your progress. And in the same time, to work with the companies or people who are interested in working with these new, young, fresh students, and to also help them understand how these badges can actually add value to their working environment. And from our experiences, there are some companies that are more willing to adapt and to adopt these new ways of looking at skills, and they already using them inside their companies, on their online platforms and so on. So they have a language, at least in this regard. And of course, there are some other companies which are not even aware of the fact that there is a different way of looking at learning and at your progress. So we actually had a few years ago some conferences aimed at companies in which we promoted badges as a new way of looking at skills. And I think this is important, because otherwise the students will have to, I don't know, to meet the companies in that place where they're still asking for the CV and the diploma, and it's not relevant, and they're going to be like, okay, so I need a diploma.
Of course, yeah.
If I can add something here, because I realized that, Anna here, I realized that we did not mention this until now, because for us, it's a very normal and common thing. But so we call it the alternative university, but it's not a legally accredited university within Romania's system. This is something that in the beginning, the team who put the model together was looking at, but after some time and after some years, I think we completely dropped the idea just because we wanted to go away from that. We didn't want to attract students who wanted or needed a diploma, but students that really want to get value in terms and improvement in terms of how they learn, how they get to live a more fulfilling and purpose-driven life than anything else. So I just wanted to mention that, because I realized we didn't until now, so maybe this will change a little bit your perspectives as well.
Yeah, I was aware of that that fact, and I think you kind of covered it earlier by speaking about many of your students also doing a bachelor's, and I think that's up to those individual students to make their way also through that system.
Yeah, exactly.
I would also want to add something on this. Diplomas are usually also play this role of transferring trust. Trust that that person has some skills, and that person has put some energy into her learning and all that. And I think this trust is somehow, it's considered automatic. So if you went to a university and you studied, let's say, management, it's assumed somehow vaguely that you can manage teams or people or projects. But this actually is, I don't think it's such a powerful transfer of trust. I think in my experience, companies look at different things, especially for the jobs that are really interesting and looked after. I think this method of having a lot of CVs and looking who has the diploma and determining, all right, you have a diploma in management, then I'm going to hire you. It doesn't work like that. So there are other things that would convince somebody to hire you. And this process of badges, but like, it's about taking responsibility of this transfer of trust. And in the moment you start creating your own portfolio and following your passion and investing a lot of time in this, but also learning to articulate your learning path. How are you good at something? Why do you think it's this way? Maybe you build your own website. Maybe you take responsibility of going to networking events and you go volunteer in some projects and people meet you. What actually happens is that you skip that process of sending your CV altogether, and you end up receiving offers to work from people that have met you, or from recommendations and all that. And I think the most interesting jobs that are out there, they are, this is how it happens. This is how people find the right persons for them. So I think it's really young people. I think young people need to learn to hack this credentialing system and take responsibility for the way they network, for the way they convey trust, and all that.
And I think that, I think that Badges put forward a really nice framework for creating new jobs, because usually you get to create learning objectives that are not necessarily on the radar for any company or individual on the planet. You can create something that's really tailor-made for your needs.
Yeah, and I think the path you're describing has always kind of been the case for artists, which my background initially was in arts, and so the portfolio and the self-directed learning, and it's really interesting to see that we're trying to hack the system and bring it across the board and transfer that trust, so that, yeah, as you say, it's not the certificate that you get at the end of your diploma or your BA, your bachelor's. It doesn't tell you everything. So I'm inspired by taking it forward that way. I think I agree that you get more interesting people for more interesting jobs. I wanted to just finish with one question that Rob speaks a lot about two types of, I guess, people in these in this transformative education paradigm that you guys, I guess, are operating in. And we describe you guys as pioneers. You have schools and you're kind of dictating your own system. And I've asked this question a few times to people. What advice would you give to people such as myself and Rob and others who are more the hackers, and we may operating in systems that are not quite as progressive or as free as the systems you're in? What hints or advice would you give to us in our practice to bring ourselves and our schools more in agreement with the kind of awesome things that you guys are doing?
For some time, a couple of years ago, we were really focused on how we could take this amazing thing that we're building here in Bucharest and take it, replicate it, or build it somewhere else in other parts of the world. And this comes mainly because after the first years, there were some people in the community traveling quite a lot around the world. I was one of them because of what the university taught me to take responsibility of my own learning. So what I realized is I actually want to go and explore the world a little more and learn about it. And education was one of the frameworks that I did that through. Troyan was another person who did that, who did a journey of 2 years around the world to research alternative education models. There were other people. So we were really looking into that. We would see gaps in other systems. We would see other communities facing the same problems that we have here in Romania. So we were like, okay, how can we take it and how can we replicate it? How can we bring it there? And I think we learned really fast that it's not an issue of replicating anything. It's not an issue of taking this that we're building here and build it somewhere else. Because what we could have done and what we could do is take the principles, take the framework and put it somewhere else. But the school that would be built there would be completely different, just because it's so personalized on the local context and the local needs of the people here. But one thing that I think we realized is that while it's very difficult to take these principles and the model and say, okay, from tomorrow we are going to apply it to a public school, or we're going to turn something like on its head completely different. Personally, I don't think that works. I also work with organizations trying to help them build healthier working environments and talking about TL organizations and TL environments. And that's one thing that I don't think that this kind of very like tough disruption can tear a school or a learning environment down. But I think what it's the case, it's taking small and tiny bits of the process and adapting it to a public model or to other learning environments. We slowly started to do that with the autonomy and learning program. Corina just went on a really nice learning journey in Mexico to connect to a university there and to teach them how they can apply the autonomy learning program in their learning environment as well. So I think it's these tiny bits, looking at the model and looking at trying to build it step by step. And again, it doesn't have to be like we're doing here, but it can be the principles, the philosophies, just going into a public school, a public classroom and thinking, how can I help these kids design their own learning? What is one question that I can start with that can turn around their learning program? I don't think it's easy, and I'm not sure I'm giving a very specific example here, but I think it's like start with the mindset first of all. Start with thinking of what would be some values or what would be some things that we would like to build together with these kids and try to instill to them. And start from there. Guys, do you have anything to add?
I can take it from here because my idea was related to this mindset that you're talking about, Anna. I was thinking about what can be a healthy mindset to have as an educator or as a student inside the traditional school, maybe, so that that environment can evolve in terms of their relationship with learning. And I think it's really interesting to look at ourselves as having these three hats in the same times. We are all learners, we are all facilitators, and we are all organizers. So, because usually a teacher might get hanged to their organizing hat. Yeah, I'm here to organize, to give the grades, to make sure things are happening, and they forget about their learner hat or facilitator hat. So I think it's an interesting mix, and if more teachers and students would become aware of those three layers and try to practice them more often, I think that would bring a change, because even by starting with being a learner, whenever you find something that's challenging or that you're disagreeing with inside that environment, by learning and by practicing this, you will be able to find new ways of tackling the same struggle, I guess. So for me, that would be it, to mix those three and live them consciously.
Excellent. Thanks for that. That's great. Yeah.
Can I add something just really quick? Like maybe you know of Ivan Illich. He's a great thinker, and he has a quote. I think it's something like, "Friendship is enough structure for a revolution." And my invitation, it's not an advice, it's just an invitation, is that we build friendships, organic friendships between these kinds of learning environments. And as you build this organic friendship, people go from one place to the other, and they find all interesting ways of collaborating. And I think the ideas that can transfer, they will transfer naturally on this framework of a friendship. So that means we can host people that are interested in learning about our models. They can invite us to their places, and we can do this lively exchange, and things will happen in their own pace. So my invitation would be, let's build these informal friendships, visit each other, stay in touch.
That's beautiful. I really like that idea, and I think for people who don't know Ivan Illich, his book on deschooling society is a really good read. And I guess a lot of the ideas in that book are similar to the ones we've talked about here. That's all my questions. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much. Really inspiring and fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
our question now is, when are you guys coming to visit?
Good question.
Soon. It's a little while from Osaka, but I'll be there soon. Rob's closer.
Yeah, I at the start of this call hadn't really considered it, but after Tryan's invitation there and after hearing the three of you discussing this, I would really like to come see this in operation.
Well, it's really interesting because we are getting ready for our annual camp, which is starting next week in a couple of days, and talking about values and talking about like how we live them in this learning community. What this camp is the best way to experience how life is in the alternative university, because we have 6 days and each day is designed to be very focused around living one value. So how do we as a community live each of the values? So you have the freedom day, you have kindness day, you have collaborating day. So that would be the best way to experience what we're all about.
If this episode of Reinventing Education was insightful or useful to you, feel free to reach out and connect to us on social media. We'd enjoy having your perspective. Join the conversation about what reinventing education might look like. Feel free to find us on our Facebook page, Reinventing Education Podcast, and join the discussions there. From Brendan and myself, thanks for joining us.